Today on Time Out Coaching, we have one of the top British professional coaches in the country. Currently the head coach at Worcester Wolves, where he won the BBL Cup final last season. Please welcome Coach Matt Newby.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Coach, great to have you on. Excited by a lot of the things that you've done and some of the things we're going to discuss. So let's get, as usual, let's get into it. How were you introduced to basketball? What was the first route for you to get involved in the game and then subsequently on to coaching?
So in terms of playing, I was very, very fortunate that I went to a very nice grammar school in North Yorkshire, in Knaresborough. Consistently, Carnegie graduates and teacher trainees would be at the school, and one such graduate was Steve Mirrorfield, who played in the British Basketball League. So he walks in, kind of shows the game to everybody, and suddenly there's like a club on 3 mornings a week where there's probably 40 or 50 kids from different year groups getting after it. And he was traditionally an exceptional role model, great athlete, and he kind of got this bug in the school for the game.
Right, that's awesome. And so subsequently, you're at the school, like all of us. We're in a situation where we've got this love of the game. Where did spark this love of the game start to take you from there? Both for playing style. You're at school. Eventually getting to university. What was the next situation after that?
So the next step was I played a little bit of junior national league for Leeds Tigers. There was a gentleman called Claude Mandawi.
Very famous,
very passionate,
very famous coach that doesn't probably get his props, but surely in the north and that region was a name synonymous with junior basketball.
Yeah, and he kind of showed me what it was to be central to a community, because he did everything. He was taking kids from the inner city in Chapeltown and giving them opportunities through sport, and that experience was really, really good for me, because I was from a small market town, and then I'm going to a big city, and obviously far more diverse community, really, really interesting place at the time. Inner city league was quite tough, but that's where you went and played basketball. And I also went to a community college called Thomas Danby, inside in inner city Leeds as well, and that's where I did my BTEC in sport. That's how I got involved in community coaching in Hare Hills and Chapeltown. That's where I got all my base level qualifications. Claude was actually the tutor on my apprentice coach at the time, and it gave me real insight into different levels of coaching in terms of on a community level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Coach. One quick question I want to ask. I can't ask this to too many people. At that time, Basketball England, really England basketball, was based in Leeds and in Batley. Batley, is that correct? No,
it was in Stanningley in this like two-story
building. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I only went there like one time. Are you feeling that, is that something that you were aware of? Did that help any of the processes? Did you think that was a good thing to have the governing body, very close to what you were doing, or was it just a non-factor in that respect?
I mean, I didn't really stay in Leeds. So when I was 19, I moved to Preston to start university, and I actually probably wasn't really that aware of the significance of the governing body being there, although there were some very, very good people involved at the time. Obviously, I believe Laszlo's tenure was probably in and around that period as well. But I'd kind of only been there once, and that was to kind of potentially register a team of a group of guys in Europe that had got together to play, and at a time when there was still an under-23s competition, because I hadn't made a decision on whether or not I was going to university, where I was going to university, and that's the only visit I took at that time.
Right. No, that's just a really off the beat interesting question. Okay, so now you go to Preston, and this is another interesting kind of scenario. So you go to university. What am I believing? That's pre UCLan. It is UCLan. Is that the?
No, it was UCLan. Basically, I'd applied for physical education at a number of institutions. Made a decision not to go for different reasons, and then took a punt on a course through clearing. I could have gone to Leeds, what became Leeds Beckett, Leeds Carnegie. I could have done that because there was still an offer on the table, but I just wanted to go somewhere different for university. So went to Preston on a sports science course that at the time was very generic. They'd only just launched it. It was the first year of it, and there was very few sports specialists involved in that degree. So a mechanist was teaching biomechanics, a physiologist was taking the sports physiology lectures, and it just didn't have the bite that, well, it had no desire to be there, honestly, a lot of the time. But fortunately, I got involved with the local sports development unit, and they gave me an opportunity to top up some of the qualifications that I had. They gave me the opportunity to work in the community again, and on the back of that, we established a small program called Preston Pride.
Which, Matt, I didn't know that fact until I think either we had that conversation or it came out in the podcast. I think it came out in the Hoops Fix podcast. I was blown away by that because, here's this, this club that I known about for a while, and has some famous alumni to it as well. And here it is. It's your baby. It's an incredible situation, and it just again reinforces that when quality people are involved in basketball in our country, that they can really make an impact and do make an impact. But sometimes their legacy is even forgotten because I'm sure most people wouldn't know that you were actually there and that you had started that club.
No, I was really fortunate. There was an elder statesman of the game called Phil Holden, who originally was involved in Manchester United and Stockport Belgrade, and he was a physical education teacher in Penwitham. So he was probably a little bit of my first mentor in a way. Right. And I remember the first game. So we registered this team. We put in an under-14s team in the under-16s league, and Manchester Magic came to Preston College and kicked our ass 166-38. And it was the Champagne year, so I think it was Alan Harris, the Joneses, this just golden generation. It was a time when probably the England team could have been a potentially 60% Manchester, sure, or something like that. But it was a good experience, and the thing was, all my peers were phys ed teachers, so you had like the old guard of the Northwest. You had Joe Forber, Pete Mintoff, Roy Blake from Blackpool, Jeff Watson from Bolton, and all of them had been stalwarts of the basketball community there. So, and so Ian France in Barrow as well. So you had a good game every game.
Malcassan.
And Malcassan. Yeah. And Mike Burton, obviously, down in Cheshire.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this was a hotbed for basketball, and not just producing, high-level players, high-level teams, but there was a concentration, like you said, of high-level coaches, which I think is an important point. So at this time, then you're in this team, you're at university. Are you starting to think that coaching could be something for you, or was it just still a passion for you? What was that process?
No, it was definitely a passion for me. I was fortunate the sports development unit supported me, and just I think I mentioned this on the podcast, by a stroke of luck, I had to attend a child protection course to obviously go and coach, and the person that took the child protection course was a guy called Hamish Telfer up at St Martin's, Lancaster, and they had a coaching degree, and I was already a little bit disillusioned with the sports science degree at Preston,
Sure.
Although it got better and it's now a great institution in terms of that.
I'm part of that
yeah, I
institution,
know.
so I can't say anything bad about that at the moment. So
no, and their coaching department's grown and so forth. But I went basically 20 miles north,
right,
and did a combined honours degree in sports coaching and applied social science, and I maintained my relationship in Preston with the sports development unit and the club, and just continued to coach, and basically worked bars on nights to make money, and coached in the daytime. That probably affected the value of my degree, really, but it was all a very good experience.
Yeah, awesome. And around this time, you've talked about some of those people that are influencing you. Talk to me about your philosophy at this time. Was there anything that you were like, hey, I like how this coach coaches, for argument's sake, in America, or you saw someone coach in the UK and you said, like, I want to be like this? Or were you just like finding your way? Because all the coaches you mentioned are all technically, tactically astute people, like really taught the game with a lot of detail.
Yeah, I mean, and because they were all born of the teaching profession, so it was very, very good to see those guys deliver. They obviously had good pedagogy as a general rule. They had good delivery skills. I think each of them had their own way as well. You could see that Joe and Pete were different to Mike Burton, who was different to Ian France, but they all of them philosophically had their kids playing hard, playing smart, and with a strong level of discipline. So I'd probably say that was probably one of the key markers, was trying to, or aspiration to get to a point where you could match those teams. And over a 2-3 year period, we became very, very competitive, and we were vying for the top, 3 or 4 positions in that league, and I think, after I finished my my degree, I was a little bit hungry for more. So I kind of, the last year I was in Lancaster, I wrote a load of emails to camps in the US, and then that was probably when I began to forge a little bit more of an understanding of the game, because the influences were significantly different, and I was out at 5-star or the Hoop Group camps, and just gleaning so much from so many different people, and really fundamentally understanding that basketball and sports performance specifically is a business, and the collegiate game certainly is a business, and that's what those camps were about. They were about exposure. They were about showing the best talent in the country to the respective coaches.
Yeah, interesting though. That's absolutely correct. But at the same time, for a coach like you, for a coach like me, and any other British coach that was going there, it was also just like a laboratory of learning all these drills, and being able to coach 50 games in a summer, of camps where you would just be able to do substitution patterns, and call timeouts, and understand how to motivate different kids. And for me, it's something that actually I think that maybe we're losing a little bit now. I don't know how many of our best younger coaches are going and doing these type of camps, or even potentially going even in Europe and doing something like that, because I think it's a on the job training, as it was.
I agree. I mean, there's only so much you can do in the academic domain, in my opinion. You have to take what you're doing in the academic domain and then apply it, and on whatever level, you develop expertise by doing the job. That's the reality of the situation, and you develop expertise by making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, what's the after university? What's this next stage? And how do you get to this Leeds kind of situation?
So I went back home. University closing was a big deal for me. there'd been some tough stuff for me personally, so I was kind of working out what next was in my life, and I ended up driving white vans for a year,
Right. Sure.
delivering furniture all around the country, listening to a lot of good music at the time,
Awesome.
and trying to contemplate in life. And then me and another person that was from the basketball fraternity in Leeds decided we'd try and set up a business. We ended up coaching in primary schools, delivering 6 to an 18-week block of fundamental skills, developing the game, and we ended up working with all the school sports partnerships in Leeds. That kind of gave me a little bit of a reputation in the city in terms of just being involved in basketball. Claude was still there and ever present with the Leeds Tigers, but we were doing a lot with the local authority and the community. And the job came up at Leeds Metropolitan University. They wanted a 50-50 split in terms of the role. It was like a community basketball outreach individual and an individual that could develop a performance program, and that was the job that I applied for and got.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic. And so, let's talk about this Leeds University situation, because basically, I mean, it wouldn't be, I think it's fair to say you took something that wasn't there and built it to, to one of the top, if not the top program in the country. Let's talk about some of those steps and what were some of the things that happened along the way and some of the key people that were involved.
I mean, I think first and foremost, it was fortuitous that the university and the vice chancellor at the time wanted to use sport as a vehicle to promote the institution. Some people were always critical of that, but sport's embedded in education all over the world. But sometimes, again, in the UK, we struggle with the performance aspect and actually investing in performance, and the institution chose to do that. There was an exceptional director of sport called Malcolm Brown, who was Dame Kelly Holmes's running coach, and he also coached the Brownlees. So that's the guy that's at the top. Wow. I had a very, very strong sports development manager in a guy called Ian Smythe, and then they built that community of sports coaches. I was the youngest one appointed at that time, so in my office, I had Jack Maitland, the Brownlees triathlon coach, Colin Stevens, who was a former British Lion, Paul Fletcher, who was a former Leeds Rhino and the most successful coach in student rugby league. Graham Potter was in there, who's now in the Premiership managing Brighton, obviously. John Hall, who was an exceptional FA educator. So I'm this young coach, and I'm doing things my way, but I've got this quite big resource, quite rich resource of experience, and that was probably the secret to the success of not just the basketball program, but at the time we went from in the 20s in university sport to being third in 3 or 4 years. So only being outdone by Loughborough and Bath. But obviously the metrics in terms of books points, it's advantageous if you've got huge athletics or huge swimming programs, because they can accrue lots of points. So I think we accrued a lot of our points in team sports, and that was where the success probably came from in terms of that department. But obviously they were trying to re-promote the heritage and history of Carnegie as a physical education institution. The Carnegie School of Sport was developing a very, very strong coaching fraternity in terms of really, really serious big hitters in terms of sports coaching as an academic discipline. Pat Duffy was there, John Lyle was there for a time. All these guys that you read the books of on your coaching degrees were passing through either as guest lecturers or being part of the faculty. And two of my assistants over the years were Bob Muir and Dave Piggott, and they're leaders right now. You know, both consult for Olympic sports or the FA respectively.
Yeah.
And so I had this kind of nice blend of an academic sounding board. Now, whether or not I listened to it at the time, or consistently listen to it. But,
were you, a couple of questions on this unique situation. Were you getting out to watch those coaches in action, about, rugby, football, whatever it was, to see, some of the things? And then secondly, in the office, was there a lot of like questioning and, how do you do this? How do you approach, dealing with an athlete, for argument's sake? Was that the type of stuff that was going on?
Yeah, and on a regular basis as well, and that's the one thing about building a culture or a fraternity or an identity. You want like-minded people sharing ideas. You want like-minded people sharing their experiences, because coaching's not an easy gig, and you can have some very big highs and you can have some significant lows. And actually, sometimes just having somebody that's gone through that, whether that's coach-athlete relationship, wins and losses, good practice, bad practice, good game, bad game, that was probably the nice thing, to have that sort of support mechanism. We did share practice. Sometimes we took sessions for each other as well. I don't think it was formal and frequent. It was, we normally pull in somebody, or can you come and look at this? And there was that sort of sharing of style, philosophy, approaches. And actually, there's some nuances of team sports that cross over, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So,
group organization, talking, how coaches, talk to players, some drills. I mean, I know in, rugby and rugby league, I don't care what they say, they steal about 50% of their stuff from basketball, just watching basketball practices. But at the same time, we also can see some of the things that they do and see if there's some, ability to replicate in our sessions. So absolutely believe in that. There's so much crossover. I mean, I was doing that in various places. First at Newcastle with the Falcons, and then when I was at Everton, we were semi-linked to Warrington Wolves as well. So it's always those type of things are great, to be able to get some sort of cross understanding and see if there's anything there. So now you're in this incredible environment. How are you building the basketball programs? Talk to me about, am I right in thinking that you were one of the first to start thinking about, scholarship programs and, how did you go about that whole process? And what were your mindset about building that program?
I mean, we were fortunate that we were given the opportunity to offer what would be a true scholarship. So that would be support against their academics, some accommodation, and a level of bursary or a food card, for example. So there was an opportunity then to go out and recruit to a certain level. Getting the best domestics would always still be very, very difficult, although we had some success with some young domestics that weren't necessarily on the radar at the time. So we obviously looked west in terms of US scholars, postgraduate scholars. And through my connections from the camps in the US, we kind of went in a certain direction. We went with Division 3 schools where kids would traditionally be academic anyway, and we knew that they were coming from programs where the expectancy wasn't super high in terms of I guess the environment, if that makes sense, because there isn't a comparison between a Division 1 school and a domestic situation, irrespective of what anyone says. And that I know that, but some people don't know that. And then we also looked east. Laszlo Nemeth was a consultant for the LTA at the time. He was working in Leeds.
Absolutely.
And he became a consultant to the university. And the only time I'd seen Laszlo prior to that really was the BCA clinics. I'd gone and watched him down in Birmingham. I'd sat next to him when the Giants won down in at the NIA when Jason Swain was playing, and I'd sat next to him, and all I heard was this monologue of what he felt was wrong with the game. I'd randomly ended up with my ticket next to his. He doesn't know that, actually, I don't think, at the time. And then I'd obviously seen him present, and he's an intense individual with just a brilliant mind, not just for basketball, but for education and the nuances of education. But he took us out to Hungary, and we recruited some pretty high level kids from Hungary for both the men's and the women's program. That was just a lovely situation. We got to see Budapest, we went down to Page, and it was, and I learned a lot just from conversations there. But he was integral to that recruitment aspect at the time. And we ended up with a kid called Zoltan Shapola, who was probably one of the best kids in the country, BBL or EBL, honestly. But people didn't necessarily give him that level of credit. He's still a professional in Hungary now. So he got his undergraduate degree, he got his master's, and he's a pro. Right. He went back to Albacom and went from there.
Yeah. At this time, is your philosophy just to build a Bucks program, or are you trying to? What was the time scale? With regards to Bucks, and then moving into like Leeds Force and a team that would start, take over, EBL.
Well, no, it was from the start. So from day one, they were accepting of the fact that to attract young domestic players, student athletes, then there would have to be a secondary level of competition on offer, and not secondary in terms of level, but there'd have to be another outlet. So we started in Bucks 1 and Division 4, and got automatic promotion to the Premiership, and then we earned promotions in the National League, and went from Division 4 to Division 1 in as many years as
it took.
It was like 3 years. We were right there, and Bucks at the time was beginning to blow up. There was the Worcester program was the forerunner at the time. A lot of talent was coming in from the US to complement their BBL aspirations at the time. There was London South Bank was very, very good. Loughborough were decent. They went a bit up and down at times, but they were very good. So the British universities and colleges competition at the time was hot.
Yeah. And from a philosophical point of view, so now you're coaching, like they're not kids, they're now, they're young adults. So this is, elite performance now. What are you said, I love the building blocks of, competition and hard work and being smart. What about from a tactical perspective? Had you changed? Had you expanded anything from there? Obviously you'd been in America and also in Europe.
I was learning on the job as a young coach, really. I was very fortunate to be in that position at the age that I was, because I was appointed when I was 27. So philosophically, I was still evolving, I suppose. And we're all still evolving, aren't we? But I probably took some very hard and fast rules from the influences from looking west. You know what I mean? So, what's non-negotiable? Like, obviously communication, hard work, all these like kind of buzzwords that are emblazoned on every locker room in the world, you know what I mean, or certainly in the NCAA. So there was probably quite a strong influence from the West, and I was very hard nosed at the time in terms of probably, well, not a lot was negotiable, actually. This is the way I would like us to play, and if you don't want to play this way, then which works to an extent, but sure. I probably learned a lot from the young men that came through the program at the time.
Also that was a different era, that worked. There were many coaches that coached with a very firm and absolute my way or the highway attitude, and those type of things back then, because most of the younger people were programmed to accept that. Now it's a little bit different. So what was the you're having massive success, you're having success in Bucks, you're having success in EBL. When did you start to get this, the BBL kind of, plan, and what was the process with regards to that?
I mean, it was part of the original intention of the program from almost its inception, that we try and climb the ranks as quickly as possible. Performance was central. We wanted to play at the highest level, that we could, that was realistic, and that aligned a lot with the aspirations of the institution at the time, and so we got to this point where we were in Division 1. We'd been successful at Division 1. We'd been amongst the top teams at the time. Reading stopped us from getting a couple of trophies. One year we won the National Cup, one year, and we won the playoffs in 2014, obviously. And we put the bid forward based on where we thought the institutional backdrop was, and made the application. It was accepted. They were pleased with not just the proposition in principle for the senior team, but a lot of the work that had been done in the community and the development of an academy and so forth. So there was a lot of pieces in place that validated the application, and we put it in. It got accepted, and then unfortunately, due to changes in institutional backdrop, the year that we were due to go in, we had to change our position. We lost the institutional support, and tried to make a go of it as an independent entity with a relationship with the university, if that makes sense. So, and the first couple of years were decent. To go in and win, I think we took 9-10 games the first year, and then did pretty well the second year. We made the playoffs, obviously. So it wasn't not a success, but unfortunately, without the infrastructure or partners with infrastructure, it became very, very difficult to continue.
Right. I mean, it's a real shame, especially considering you'd conceived this idea and built this whole program, and for that main funding stream and support whole structure, just to be taken away at the most crucial time. And again, much like Birmingham, but obviously Birmingham has even more history. It's criminal that a city the size of Leeds does not have a frontline team, professional team playing. I mean, it's something that is disappointing. I mean, it's something that we as a sport have got to deal with. Just going back, in Bucks, and also just trying to get pinned down a little bit, what you were doing tactically, from a basketball perspective. Were you, talk to me about, your defensive philosophy and your offensive philosophy at that time?
I mean, it was probably very, very traditional, hard nosed, strict rules, one type of coverage, pick and roll, very much individually accountable, not necessarily the nuances of like switching or multiple coverages in terms of pick and roll. Was never really his own person, was never really hard full court pressure person at the time. Although if there was a necessity to do so. But I don't think we played any zone defense other than inbounds in Division 2. That's it. That's the only thing I can remember.
Right.
And maybe like when we were struggling with injuries, I think we kind of went to a series of junk defenses just for like a 3 or 4 game period, just box and 1, triangle and 2, and then 2-3, just consistently in rotation. That was kind of one of the points that that there was just a significant change, but by virtue of the situation. And then offensively, probably started off with, again, this is an American thing, but the idyllic sort of Princeton way and a passing offense, and then you kind of realize, well, the Princeton was designed for an era and a shot clock that affords you to break a team down
systematically
over 30 plus seconds.
Exactly.
And then when you try and get to that aspiration in 24, although the values and principles of that specific way are excellent, it's probably difficult to get to the aspiration that you had originally. So
it's funny though. It's funny because so many entries and so many of the actions now come out of some of the Princeton principles, like the back cutting, the handoff, the respacing. I mean, this is like where the game is in this day and age. So it's so funny how things come full circle. I mean, I'm seeing so much, originally, shuffle stagger was such a big set, in the 2000s. But now there's a lot of shuffle kind of screening, but even from further out, because now so much space and you can get some easy cuts to the basket. These things all come around, flex actions, pin down actions, all this type of stuff. It's back, everything has an evolution, but it is ironic you say that. That's great stuff. One quick question I want to ask about the zone. When you say that you didn't play zone, it's good. It's great. It's a really interesting point. Is there something that in your background that put you to that? Like, hey, we should always be really good in man to man, or it was, is there any reasoning behind it?
Yeah, part of it's like was just a pride thing, because you kind of like, when you grow up, I'm thinking about the sort of Northwest times. There was probably only a couple of coaches there that would have played zone, or there was a lot of, like, Manchester would press you for as long as they could, and play very, very hard nosed, half court, man to man as a general rule, and only drop something in like that as a change up, maybe on an inbound, just to change the look. But also, I think it was just a level of confidence, because I think the way sometimes people look at a zone defense is that it's an easy fix, and you set your alignment up and this is what you do. And at the time, I just genuinely wasn't confident enough bluffing it. I didn't know how to teach a 1-3-1 to the level that I wanted to teach a 1-3-1. I didn't. Oh, this happened last time. Sorry, right. Apologies, they're saving money.
I've forgotten about that. Yeah, no, great stuff. Now, I want to just discuss between Leeds and Worcester. Let's not. There's one thing I really want to talk to you about, which is stuff that you were doing, kind of like, say, it's off court, but the camp programs that you put together. You were the coach that brought 5-star to the UK, and you were the coach that also brought Red Star to the UK. Can you talk? I mean, that's two iconic basketball brands. Talk about that situation.
So the 5-star relationship had obviously been long-standing, and I was fortunate that Lee Klein was willing to take a punt on bringing the camp to the UK. They'd already done some stuff in Australia. They'd been out to Turkey and China, and obviously I'd worked with them for a long time. So we we talked about it and joked about it, and because logistically there's a lot to do to kind of make these things happen.
Sure.
And then they said, well, do you want to give it a go? And we did. And I think the first 3 years, there was maybe 150 to 175 kids benefiting from great coaching. What is, the 5-star model, it's very intense. The stations and the program were really well put together, as you would picture. And we had like some pretty serious coaches come over. Like we had Pete Gillen, who was the former Xavier and Virginia coach, Mitch Bonagero, who was at Siena. We had Scott Adebato come over. Bobby Gonzalez came over. So these are like Division 1 legends, and they came and they were kind of the senior coaches on camp. Then we would bring over what you would consider the regular 5-star guys that are normally very strong high school coaches, or guys that have been with 5-star for a period of time. And then one of my aspirations with the 5-star camp was to give as many young domestic coaches the opportunity as possible. So if you look at the pictures from the first three to 5 years, you've got Mark Stewart all in the mix, Alan Keane came up, Josh Merrington, who else? There's a whole bunch. Craig Nickel, Troy Cully. So all these guys came hang out. Mark Stewart. Did I say Mark already? Yeah. So those guys were all coming down, and A, they were young and ambitious. B, they lent so much to the environment themselves.
Sure. And
C, they took something away from the environment, whether that was the coaches clinic at the beginning of the week, where the lead guys from the US would share ideas, or it was working together. And there's a little bit of a generation there that have come up, and I think most of them took GB jobs or England jobs. So that's quite nice. Born of their own work ethic and under their own merit, I must say. But it was nice to see those guys grow up within the British basketball community. And then, unfortunately, things started to go in a different direction in the US in terms of camps. We still had aspirations of doing it, but we took a decision not to return a camp that year. Whilst things have been moving with the youth program in Leeds, kind of built quite a strong but small academy. We forged a link with Red Star Belgrade. I think you probably know, I don't know if you do know, but a couple of young British coaches went out there. I think Mandy got them out there because she had a relationship with them. Signed one of them was Gary Carter. He'd worked 5-star for me. Right. And he'd asked if I wanted an introduction to take a team there. And we had a very good generation of kids. So we had quite a few national teams players at the time. And I wanted to test them, so we took them out to Belgrade. It was the time we went out, it was fortuitous. We ended up when the Swiss had a training camp, the Romanians had a training camp, and Denmark had a training camp, national teams. So we had City Leeds Basketball Academy going head to head with these 3 national teams. And to be fair, we did all right in 2 of the games. And then the Danish, whose generation was very strong that year, they went forwards, but it was a good experience for the kids. And just by virtue of that trip, we had conversations with the senior leadership of the Red Star Sports School. I said, would there be an interest in potentially exchanging and doing something in the UK? And they said they agreed to it. We set it up, and they came over and got that going. And obviously, significantly different in approaches. Sure. Yeah, and the level of detail and the teaching is good from both quarters. But well, you've worked with Serbs yourself. There's just this incredible eye for what's right, what's wrong, and there's a reason that a nation of 7 million produces consistently the best players in the EuroLeague, the best coaches in the EuroLeague, and so on.
Yeah, some of the best coaches in the world. Exactly. Yeah, it's a great debate that I am going to propose very soon about what is it that that they do as a nation with such a small dynamic. But I'm sure, as you spent quite a bit of time in Belgrade, when you're there, you're just immersed in a basketball culture. And that's something that I think is so important. I mean, I've experienced that very luckily, also in places like the Philippines, where everything is geared to one sport, and a little bit like it is with our country to football, soccer, where we're so devoted to the game. It's part of our culture. Um, Obviously there's a break, and you're running this academy and junior teams in Leeds. Let's just move on to how the Worcester situation came about, because I want to talk a lot about that. What was different. So, it's almost 2 years ago now. What was the process with regards to that? And then, once you were appointed, what was your mindset going into that job?
Yeah. So the job obviously was advertised. They'd had a couple of tough seasons, I think, and specifically the last year, Ty unfortunately was poorly, and then obviously you came in to close the season. The job came up, and for me personally, it was sort of quite a tough one to kind of go in on it. Because obviously how things had finished at Leeds were pretty tough. I'd had 2 years working, with youth and in the community. Whilst I was still at Leeds Beckett on a small contract, still trying to drive some level of a books program, but it came up, and I kind of wanted to prove a little bit of something to myself, and in a way prove something to a certain aspect of the basketball community as well.
Listen,
if I'm being honest with you.
I tried to explain this to a few people that we've talked. We've had like nearly 30 really good coaches through this series, but ultimately you get involved in sport to win. You're trying to win, or you're trying to develop players, but you're trying to win. It is a competitive game. But I also say, like players, as coaches, you've got to have some, like I would always want to beat Fab, or, beat, like some of my greatest wins were against Chris Finch. I'm happy to be able to hold my hand up, and against Nick, like I beat these NBA coaches. You've got to be able to, drive yourself that way. And I'm really happy you say that, because I do sense, without fully asking you, even offline, that there was a motivation to prove, like you say, the basketball community or the basketball public, or however you want to describe that you're one of our best coaches. And I think that's an interesting way. So in saying that, how did you go about it once you got the job? What was the things that you went in there and said, I'm changing from how I did it originally? Was there, or you just said, I'm going to stay good to what I've done in the past?
I mean, you should be consistently evolving, right? But there's certain things I think you probably keep. You've got to try and be true to yourself. So if there's certain things that do work, whether that's how you approach a player, whether it's the design of your system, whether it's the culture and identity of the program, or the players that wear the vest, that you have the tenure over, then you need to ensure that you back yourself on that, and trust it, And then if things don't work, or if things do need adjusting, then you've got to be professional enough to make those changes. But the reality was, I was given a very, very good opportunity. The management were were very good in giving me ownership of the recruitment, giving me ownership of what the product looked like on the floor. And that first year, I'm more comfortable working with younger players. That's who I am. So young up and coming players, I tend to have good relationships with. I think I get them. I think I understand them. And from a recruitment perspective, there's nothing better than working with guys that have something to prove. And I guess that was probably in that first season, there was, a number of guys that had something to prove in different ways. When guys get overlooked in recruitment, or they come out of a smaller school, or they're a domestic guy that's never, necessarily received the credit that they deserve, then you've got the perfect ingredients for a team that, at the very least, competitive, at the very least. But ideally motivated to again prove people wrong and move forward.
And did you what did you do last year, last season, and then taking it into this season from a tactical perspective? Was there some things you changed, or were you keeping it fairly consistent to your philosophy?
I mean, it's quite funny because some of the players in the league, some of the coaches, you're like, this is Matt. He's run this for a decade. Yeah, I've run it for a decade, but it still works. So let's be right about it. Or alternatively, when you look at your personnel, then what you've run, you might need to tweak. Or, I mean, I have to say, like, in terms of recruitment, there's probably a certain DNA of a player that I want, and there's a certain skill set that you want, and they've got to be able to contribute in different quarters, and not necessarily play my way, but understand how I see it. Does that make sense? And then I mean, I'm a big believer in creating a platform for the players offensively that they enjoy and they get a return from. I mean, on a basic level, an offense is something to create an advantage for guys to finish the play. If I'm really being honest about it, and if they can create an advantage, extended advantage, and maintain that advantage till the best outcome, then that's a good offense.
Yeah.
Now there are players that can create their own advantage and just do, but they're very, very special. Defensively, last year we probably switched a lot more than we have done this year. Although we still switch within the interior and the perimeter, but not necessarily across, unless it's late plot, or unless the three, for example, is of a good size. So if it's Dosh and Jordan, for example, this year, then we afford that at different times. Right. But I think I've been reasonably consistent over the past few years. This year's been a bit more interesting because the season's been dissected into two, really, because I can have the grand designs that I have, but unfortunately, for genuine reasons, we didn't have our full roster till Christmas time.
Yeah.
So some of the grand design had to be adjusted, and some of the games that we played and the way we played, we had to do things in a different way. But on the whole, I kind of stick to my guns.
I'm trying to get an understanding. So, you don't feel that you radically changed, from, say, the Leeds, top teams in the Leeds era, to now. And it's a situation where you obviously were given, a much better budget, with, really good basketball conditions, being able to practice and, the strength conditions, side. Is that correct? Or you think that, you did evolve, especially with the recruiting process?
I think the recruitment process was different because the budget is significantly different. Yeah. So the quality of player that I could potentially access was higher. So I had to be more diligent in terms of that. And obviously, I used yourself as a sounding board. I used some trusted friends in the basketball community as a sounding board. But I'm still looking for, I guess, in terms of the player's DNA, I'm looking for the same type of person to start with.
Interesting.
You know, somebody that understands that you have to survive in basketball, that you've got to have a great attitude and aptitude for learning, you know, that you can't be arrogant, ignorant, or apathetic. You know, you don't want that. Those are not traits that are attractive to a coach.
Sure.
You know, in terms of their skill set, you know, obviously when you're shopping for a player, you want the highest return on that investment. But if there's super strengths to a specific player and they suit you systematically, whether that's defensively or offensively, then, you know, you'll take a punt on them. And I don't know. I don't think my values have changed too much, you know, in terms of who I want to work with. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You know, we had some significant overachievers in these, you know, guys that came out of London that, you know, good basketball pedigree, but, you know, they came and they outworked everybody else, you know, and those are the guys that you want on your side, aren't they? You know, those are the guys that you want in your jersey, not theirs. So.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's awesome. Just very quickly on Worcester, let's talk about the cup final run last year. You know, I mean, it's not easy, you know, at any time to win something, you know, let alone where you go in, you know, you have to recruit a team from scratch and then play in your first season. Just talk a little bit about that process and, you know, how it felt being able to, you know, to lift that trophy in your first season there.
I mean, the cup win was a big deal for a number of reasons. One, I think I said it before, like there was some level of vindication for maybe some hard yards fought, and it meant a lot to me personally and my family. But I think the success was the development in the young group that we had and the growth in confidence, you know, in the build up in it, you know, that we I believe we took the hardest route to the final. You know, we had to match up with Newcastle. You know, we had to match up with Leicester, and you know, you've already alluded to it, that in terms of the big wins, a game against Rob Paternostro and the Leicester Riders is as tough as it gets in this league right now.
Totally.
Because of the depth of the team, the experience of the coach, and so forth. So, you know, when you've taken on the likes of, you know, Ramon, Fletcher, Darius Defoe, and the like in the quarterfinals and then in the semi-finals, you know, we managed to beat Leicester over the two games and take them on the home court, which is a rarity in this league at this moment in time.
I mean, listen, you know, unfortunately, you know, we don't have a very good, you know, and this is not disrespectful, but we don't have a very good basketball press in respect to, we just don't have like people that really can tell a story. And, you know, that was one of the great, you know, wins against, you know, a powerhouse team that was potentially would have won the league or the playoffs. You know, they were definitely going towards that way last year. With a great coach, a great setup. And again, I'm happy that you won the final because that's the story. But, you know, it's funny because I'm about to write something about me beating Newcastle 11 years ago to, you know, in the semifinals before we won the playoff championship. And that was one of the greatest wins in my view that we had in a two-leg final. We'd absolutely crushed them by nearly 40 points. And that was when, you know, they were coming off of winning, you know, unprecedented amount of trophies. So I totally get where you are on that. The final itself, you know, was there anything that you know that stands out from a tactical point of view or from a basketball perspective, or everything went to plan?
Well, I think that, you know, that was a good advertisement for British basketball in itself. You know, Bristol are a storied franchise as well. You know, and I basically grew up on the same path or a similar path to Andreas in terms of, you know, going through the ranks, going through the leagues. So that was always going to be a game that was personal to both of us. And when you know somebody that well in terms of, I guess, how they prepare teams, what they do offensively and defensively, wasn't just about the X's and O's, because again, they were well versed. It was probably down to who showed up on the day as individuals and as a collective, and stuck with the game plan, and I think both teams did, because it was a well fought game. It was probably a low scoring final, in contrast to a lot that have gone before it. And
well, it's not an easy place to play in, and
no.
and the rings are like rock as well. That's what everyone forgets. Those rings and backboards only get played on like once or twice a year, and so that's one of the things we used to always argue about. Is myself and people like Rob, we don't get enough time to practice on those those rings, and then secondly, they're not played on. So any type of like missed layup just bounces off like crazy. So yeah, it's a tough one.
I mean, there was some very strong individual performance. Amir did a great job, but I think it was a team coming into form, if that makes sense. Sure. Like I say, that they'd begun to trust each other, and that's not easy with a young team. And a season's relatively short, and you've got to do a lot early to try and ensure that your team at that juncture in the season is rolling, because in our league, the trophy and the cup precede the close of the league and the playoffs mid-season. Normally within about a month or so of each other. So there's two pieces of silverware that you're chasing concurrently with the
league
with the league. Yeah. So which is interesting in itself. But I genuinely, it was an enjoyable day. Like I say, it was one that was very personal to me, and I've got some very fond memories, and I'm very, very thankful for each of the players and their application in that season, because it was a young group, it was a new group, and they were incredibly professional.
Just very quickly talk about what is a typical week for you. What's your practice methodology, going into a game. Say the game is, for argument's sake, on, I guess, Friday, and you played on Saturday. What Sunday is a day off. Monday, how do you normally operate?
I mean, this season we haven't
pre-pandemic. Yeah, pre-pandemic.
It's been wild. We've been doing 5 games in 10 days this year. So, but in a regular week, there's normally a minimum of 14 practices, Monday through Thursday. I'm a big believer in a lot of live practice, a lot of advantage scenarios, a lot of 4-on-4, 5-on-5. So the staple for the week is, of that week, normally three of those practices will end in 5-on-5 practice. Okay. and game scenarios. Where it changes is, in the beginning of the week, the 4-on-4, 5-on-5 will reflect us as a team. As we build towards the end of the week, the 4-on-4 and 5-on-5 will reflect more of the opposition, or nuances of their defense or offense, how we would cover them and how they would cover us. There's normally 2 or 3 individual practices. This year, aspirationally, what I wanted to do was make it more position specific. So the interiors would lift as a group and do their skill development as a group, and the perimeters would do the same.
Right.
Does that make sense? And they flip flop in the morning. So that's 3 mornings a week, and a lot of the preparation in terms of the scout is done in the week, and that's published normally midweek. That's on an online medium, as is all the film, the individual scout and the team scout. My priority normally is on court, and ensuring that the team sees, feels, and understands what they're trying to do, as a general rule, and try and get to a point where they are contributing to the solutions. So if I'm, in the last stages of the week, if we're walking through Plymouth and I've said, I think we want to switch this, or this is the best coverage for this player, I like to see them play it out. And you can normally tell whether the player's going to go with this or not.
Sure.
Like you've been there before. Do you know what I mean? And that's actually sometimes better than an hour and a half of film, because if they don't believe it, if they don't trust it, you're going to have a problem.
No, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I approach things.
Great, that's fantastic. Very quick talk on British coaching and this word, the coaching fraternity. What's your thoughts and your experiences, and how do we improve upon it? What's your thoughts here on that situation?
I knew this question was coming. So I don't genuinely believe we have a coaching fraternity. Because I'd be lying to you if I said otherwise. I think there's pockets of people that trust each other and that lean on each other and that challenge each other to develop. But in terms of nationally, I wouldn't suggest we've got a coaching fraternity. I think the coaching talent that sits domestically is a lot better than people think. I don't think we tell enough positive stories about one another. I think there's a lack of trust in the fraternity in a way. And I don't know what that's born of, but a fraternity suggests to me that we're all looking in the same direction, wanting to genuinely improve the situation that we're in, and that we're happy to see people succeed. And I don't know if that is true here. I think there's, like I say, there's groups that will work together, but there's always like an underlying, an underlying theme that stops us, or barrier that stops us from making the steps forward that we should. Because
do you think that's because we don't have a coaches association, or more importantly, we're never ever together all in one place?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to look at it is, what do other federations do? What do other countries do? There's at least one hoop summit a year where the coaching fraternity can be together. There is normally a coaching association, but there has to be value in what that hoop summit looks like. There has to be value in what the association offers. So, a lot of the guys that you've had on the podcast, and rightly so, have championed the BCA. I've still got an orange Nike clipboard. I've still got your notes, Laszlo's notes. Yeah, and I just think there's maybe a lack of willingness to understand that those environments are going to make you better. They are going to give you information, and you can take it or leave it. But actually, the most powerful things about those associations or these hoop summits is you get to network. You sit down and talk with 4 other people on a subject, or 5 other people on a subject, or somebody presents a topic or an idea to you, and you can take it or leave it.
Yeah. Well, I also think that any clinic situation or like you say, a summit or something, you get to know people in certainly a different way. If you just compete against someone, you don't really know what they're doing in practice, or you can only guess, and then suddenly you don't also realize their circumstances. And I think that, I've been at some places and suddenly spoke to someone, outside of the clinic or wherever it is, and you start to like, wow, it's a really interesting person, and then you become emotionally attached to that person, and you want them to see them succeed. So I think we do miss that connectivity in what would be more of a relaxed setting. It's not a formal setting. I think that's something we're missing the trick on.
And absolutely, and I think also you were sent too quickly in the British basketball coaching fraternity. So, it's almost assumed that you're a coach when you walk away with a certificate, or because it's emblazoned on a polo shirt.
Yeah.
And it's almost, I've got my ticket, I'm good to go. Well, no, your ticket was for the door.
Yeah.
Your ticket was for entrance. Now let's go to work, and I think, unfortunately, we're as a sport, we have professional aspirations but amateur sensibilities, and until that changes, we're going to have a lot of issues. In other countries, the best coaches are working with the youngest age categories, or there's great coaches working across the age categories.
Sure.
They don't just want to do an RPC or an Aspire, and the next year they're a national teams coach. And that's quite. I feel quite strongly about this, because I think we should be developing experts in community basketball. I think we should be developing experts in the development domain. Yeah. So, and I think we should be developing experts in the performance domain. And then above that, that's when it's elite. Yeah. And if you've got all those phases correct, if you've significantly developed enough individuals that are passionate and have a desire simply to deliver at that level, then you're going to build a critical mass of players, that actually are arriving at an age and stage with a level of competency, and the other thing with that is that's where a real coaching fraternity would come from, where people actually recognize the relevance of a coach working at those levels, not looking down on them. No. Actually understanding that they're fundamental in developing a performance pathway. Because you ain't going to get elite kids. You're not going to get performance kids without somebody walking into a school and giving a child, the enjoyment of the game first, and giving them aspirations, and giving them physical literacy for that sport.
No, it's absolutely true. Yeah. And also, my last point on that is having the expertise to be able to assess these, talented young players that have some characteristics that could play. I mean, we want to broaden the base. That's 1,000%. But we also need some expertise when they go into certain schools and they see a kid. It's funny, I have always a funny story that when I was in Glasgow, there was a 6'4" kid at 12 years old, and I went to the federation, I went to everywhere I could to get that kid into a basketball club, and as Kieran told me, he doesn't think he ever got that opportunity. That kid, would have been 6'8", 6'9", he would have just been a beast, and he was like had some African heritage as well, and you could just see athletically he was incredible, and he was playing in a basketball tournament, and he was enjoying the whole process, and there we are. We lost an ability to get a kid, so it's crazy. Let's get 3 quick questions to finish it up with. Favorite all-time basketball coach?
That's a tough one. Bob Hurley Senior.
Okay.
100%.
Right. Yeah, that's the second person that said that. Was great. Favorite drill that you run now or in the past? Yeah.
We run a lot that's half-court defense with transition, and I use it every week. And we can put Plymouth's offense in, we can put Leicester's offense in, but we always reward the defense, plus they accrue points for different things. So for the rebounding, for the deflection, for the stop, and the guys like it. It's competitive. Some of them try to cheat the rules, but it's always gone down well. Great.
Okay, love that. And then lastly, what's your favorite go-to saying or statement that maybe the players hear every single day or week?
I mean, there's I'm a big talker, and they don't like all the big words, but I think I've said this before, but I like it in the, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, and I used to have it on a no fear t-shirt that I got on my first trip to America. Yeah. And I think it's true. There's a lot of young people that find a reason not to do something rather than the reason to do something, and sometimes you've got to be able to just take a chance on something. Speak to someone, be brave enough to travel, be brave enough to ask the question.
Yeah. Coach, as usual, we could go on forever. I know this has been one of the toughest seasons you ever coached in with this COVID season. You're still there. You've got a real chance in these playoffs. I wish you success there. And I know that, you're in such a great situation. I think that you've got, the real ability to grow the program even bigger than what it is at this moment. And I just wish you success for all these, for the playoffs and all these future years coming.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you for your support as well.